The year was 2347, and humanity had finally reached the stars. After 2 centuries of slow expansion through their own solar system and nearby colonies, humans made contact with something far greater than themselves. They called it the Galactic Concord, a massive alliance of 47 alien species that had ruled the galaxy for over 12,000 years. These beings had built empires, while humans were still living in caves. They had conquered worlds while humans were learning to make fire. And now, they looked at humanity the way a giant looks at an ant. Admiral Daniel Carter was chosen to represent Earth at the great neutral station called Velos Prime. He was a tall man, with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen many battles. He wore his dress uniform with pride as his small human shuttle docked at the massive alien station. The station itself was larger than most cities on Earth. It floated in space like a metal flower, with docking arms stretching out in every direction. Ships from dozens of species came and went, like bees around a hive. Daniel stepped off his shuttle and felt the weight of 1,000 alien eyes on him. The beings around him were strange and varied. Some had scales like reptiles. Some had fur like animals. Some had no faces at all. Just smooth heads with sensors, where eyes should be. They all looked at him with the same expression. It was the look someone gives to a small child who has wandered into an important meeting. The council chamber was a vast circular room with seats rising up like a stadium. Representatives from all 47 species sat in their designated areas. At the center was a raised platform where the High Chancellor sat. His name was Vorax, and he was a Zenthari, one of the most powerful species in the Concord. His body was covered in dark green scales, and his eyes were like yellow flames. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. Daniel stood alone on the floor below, looking up at the assembled aliens. He felt very small, but he did not let it show on his face. He had prepared for this moment his entire life. Humanity had prepared for this moment for 300 years. The negotiations lasted for 6 weeks. Daniel spoke about humanity's desire to join galactic society. He talked about their technology, their culture, their dreams. He asked for trade agreements and military alliances. He requested ships and weapons to defend Earth's growing colonies from pirates and raiders. The council listened with barely hidden amusement. To them, humans were like children playing at being adults. Their ships were slow and clumsy. Their weapons were primitive. Their understanding of physics was centuries behind the most basic conquered species. What could such creatures possibly offer to beings who had mastered the stars? On the final day, High Chancellor Vorax delivered the Council's decision. Humanity would be granted provisional membership in the Galactic Concord. But they would not be equals. They would be a client species, placed under the protection of the Zenthari Empire. This meant they would serve as laborers, miners, and cleaners across Concord space. They would do the jobs that other species considered beneath them. Daniel kept his face calm as he listened. Inside, his heart was burning with anger, but he showed nothing. He simply nodded and asked one question. What about our request for ships and technology to defend our colonies? Vorax's lipless mouth stretched into something like a smile. He waved one clawed hand and spoke to his aides. They whispered among themselves, and soon the chamber filled with harsh alien laughter. We will give humanity a gift, Vorax announced. A generous gift, to help your species understand your place in the galaxy. The gift arrived at Earth 3 months later. 3 massive cargo haulers entered human space and unloaded their contents at Luna Shipyard 7, the largest construction facility in the solar system. When the workers opened the cargo containers, they found exactly what Vorax had sent: scrap metal. The containers were filled with broken reactor cores that leaked radiation. There were damaged hull plates, with holes rusted through them. There were weapons so old and outdated that even the poorest Concord species had stopped using them centuries ago. There were computer systems with corrupted databanks. There were engine parts that no longer fit any ship in production. It was garbage, pure and simple garbage. The Zenthari had cleaned out their junkyards and sent the trash to humanity as a joke. The message was clear. This is all your kind deserves." When Daniel Carter returned to Earth and saw the mountains of scrap, his staff expected him to be furious. They expected him to demand revenge, or at least lodge a formal complaint with the Concorde. Instead, he did something that confused everyone. He smiled. Daniel walked through the piles of broken technology, with his hands behind his back. He picked up pieces of alien equipment and examined them carefully. He ran his fingers over damaged hull plates and studied the strange metals they were made from. His smile grew wider with every step. His aide, a young woman named Laura Bennett, finally asked him what he was thinking. Laura was the chief engineer of Luna Shipyard 7, a genius who had designed half the ships in Earth's fleet. She had red hair tied back in a practical bun and grease stains on her uniform from working alongside her crews. Daniel turned to her with eyes that sparkled with something dangerous. "They think they have insulted us," he said quietly. "They think this garbage will keep us in our place, but they have made a terrible mistake." Laura looked at the scrap metal around them. She saw broken reactors and damaged weapons and useless computer parts. She did not understand. Daniel picked up a piece of alien hull plating. It was cracked and corroded, thrown away as worthless. But when he held it up to the light, Laura could see the strange molecular structure of the metal. It was technology far beyond anything humans had ever built. "They gave us their garbage," Daniel said. "But their garbage is still more advanced than our best work. They see trash. I see a school. Every piece of this scrap will teach us something. And when we have learned everything these broken machines can teach us, we will build something new, something they never expected, something that will make them regret the day they laughed at humanity." He handed the hull plate to Laura. She took it and felt its weight in her hands. For the first time, she understood what he was saying. "How long do we have?" she asked. "As long as we need. They think we are nothing. Let them keep thinking that. It will make the surprise all the sweeter." Laura looked at the mountains of alien scrap metal around her. Then she looked at her shipyard, filled with the most skilled engineers and workers humanity had ever produced. A slow smile spread across her face. "I am going to need a bigger team," she said. Daniel nodded. "You will have everything you need. This project is now the most important thing in human history. We are going to take their insult and turn it into a weapon, and one day, when the time is right, we will show the entire galaxy what humanity can do when we are pushed to the edge." He turned and walked away, leaving Laura standing among the scrap. She looked up at the stars through the shipyard's massive windows. Somewhere out there, aliens were laughing at humanity. They thought they had won. They had no idea what they had just started. Luna Shipyard 7 went dark. Not literally dark, because the lights still burned and the machine still hummed with power. But it went dark to the rest of the galaxy. All communications were cut. All visitors were turned away. The 12,000 workers who lived and worked there were told they could not leave or contact anyone outside until their task was complete. They were building something secret, something that would change everything, and the universe could not know about it until they were ready. Laura Bennett stood at the center of it all. She had traded her engineer's uniform for simple work clothes covered in grease and burn marks. She slept 4 hours a night when she slept at all. She ate her meals standing up while reading reports and examining broken alien technology. Her red hair had started showing streaks of gray from the stress, but her eyes burned brighter than ever. The project was called Ascendant, and it began with learning. Laura divided her teams into groups, each one assigned to study a different type of alien technology from the scrap piles. One group worked on the Zenthari shield generators. Another studied Koravan power relays. A third team examined Thalorian weapons systems. A fourth worked on Valdori hull plating. Every piece of garbage that the Concorde had sent them was taken apart, studied, documented, and understood. The work was slow and dangerous. 3 workers died in the first month when a damaged reactor core released a burst of radiation. 5 more were injured when an old weapon system activated during examination. But the teams learned from every accident and pressed forward. They built better safety systems. They created new tools to handle alien technology. They wrote manuals for equipment that no human had ever touched before. Commander Nathan Brooks was the military officer assigned to oversee the project. He was a quiet man with dark skin and patient eyes who had served in Earth's space forces for 20 years. His job was to take whatever the engineers learned and figure out how to use it in combat. He spent his days watching simulations and his nights reading intelligence reports about Concord military tactics. What he found surprised him. The conquered species were powerful, but they were also predictable. They had not fought a real war in over 1,000 years. Their fleets followed rigid formation patterns that had not changed in centuries. Their commanders followed rules written by officers who had died before humans learned to build rockets. They were strong, but they were also lazy. They had forgotten how to adapt. Nathan shared his findings with Laura during their weekly meetings. They would sit in her small office surrounded by blueprints and alien artifacts, drinking cold coffee and planning humanity's revenge. They rely on numbers, Nathan explained one night. Every battle in their history was won by whoever had the bigger fleet. They do not think in terms of individual ship quality. They think in terms of mass. Laura nodded slowly. So if we build one ship that can fight 10 of theirs, they will not know what to do. Exactly. Their tactics assume that every ship is roughly equal to every other ship of the same class. They have never faced an enemy that breaks that assumption. The breakthrough came in month 8. Dr. Megan Torres was a young physicist with messy brown hair and glasses that she was always pushing up her nose. She had been assigned to study the damaged reactor cores that the Xanthari had thrown away. These reactors were considered too unstable and dangerous by Concord safety standards. They produced enormous amounts of power, but they had a tendency to explode if not handled perfectly. Megan spent 3 months studying the reactors before she understood why the Xanthari had discarded them. The cores were not broken. They were just difficult. They required constant monitoring and adjustment to remain stable. The Xanthari preferred equipment that worked without attention, so they had thrown the cores away and replaced them with safer but weaker models. But humans were used to difficult equipment. They had spent centuries nursing temperamental machines through harsh conditions. Megan designed a new containment system that used human monitoring technology to keep the alien reactors stable. Then she did something that no Concord engineer would ever consider. She linked 5 of the reactors together. The power output was staggering. A single human ship equipped with Megan's reactor array could produce more energy than a Xanthari battleship 3 times its size. This meant stronger shields, faster engines, and weapons that could punch through anything the Concord had built. Laura stared at the test results with her mouth hanging open. This is impossible. These numbers cannot be right. Megan smiled nervously. I checked them 7 times. They are right. The Xanthari threw away these reactors because they were scared of them. They never imagined anyone would be crazy enough to use 5 at once. And the containment system will hold? As long as we have good people monitoring it, yes. It requires constant attention, but it will hold. Laura laughed out loud for the first time in months. Good people monitoring it, that is what we do best. Lieutenant Kevin Shaw joined the project in month 10. He was a pilot, one of the best in Earth's fleet, with quick reflexes and a mind that could track a dozen variables at once. His job was to develop combat tactics for the new ship they were building. He worked with Nathan Brooks and a team of strategists to create fighting techniques that exploited every weakness in Concord military doctrine. Kevin ran thousands of simulations. He tested attack patterns and defensive maneuvers. He studied how Concord ships moved and found their blind spots. He learned that their targeting systems were optimized for fighting enemies who moved in straight lines. Because that was how every Concord species had fought for millennia. A ship that moved unpredictably would confuse their computers and throw off their aim. The ship began to take shape in month 12. They called it the Defiance. And it was ugly. By Concord standards, it was hideous. The smooth, elegant lines that alien ships were known for were nowhere to be seen. Instead, the Defiance looked like someone had welded together pieces from 100 different vessels, because that was exactly what they had done. The hull was made from Valdori stealth plating that had been repurposed as armor. The engines were hybrid systems that combined human designs with alien technology. The weapons were rebuilt, Thalorian cannons enhanced with human targeting computers. The shields were Xanthari generators boosted by Korrivan power relays. And at the heart of it all sat Megan's impossible reactor array, humming with enough power to light up a small moon. Admiral Daniel Carter visited the shipyard on the day the Defiance was completed. He walked through the corridors with Laura at his side, running his hands along the walls and examining every system. The ship smelled like new metal and fresh wiring. It felt alive, like a sleeping beast waiting to wake up. They reached the bridge, a circular room filled with control stations and viewing screens. The captain's chair sat at the center, raised slightly above the rest. Daniel lowered himself into it and gripped the armrests. He could feel the ship's power thrumming through the deck beneath his feet. "Report," he said quietly. Laura stood before him with a tablet in her hands. "All systems operational. Reactor array stable. Weapons charged. Shields at full capacity." "She is ready, sir." "How does she compare to Concord vessels?" Laura's tired face split into a wide grin. "Sir, there is not a single ship in the Concord fleet that can match her. Not even their flagships. We took their garbage and built the most powerful warship in the galaxy." Daniel nodded slowly. He looked around the bridge at the stations where his crew would soon sit. 800 men and women who would fly this impossible ship into battle against enemies who had laughed at humanity. "Good," he said. "Then it is time to show them what humans can do when we stop asking for permission." He stood up and walked to the main viewing screen. Through the shipyard's windows, he could see the stars stretching out into infinity. Somewhere out there, the Concorde was waiting. They had no idea what was coming. The Defiance was ready, and humanity's revenge was about to begin. The USS Defiance slipped out of Luna Shipyard 7 on a cold morning in March. She moved slowly at first, like a predator stretching after a long sleep. Her ugly hull caught the light of distant stars as she turned toward the darkness of deep space. 800 crew members sat at their stations, hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. They were about to do something that no human had ever done before. Admiral Daniel Carter sat in the captain's chair, with his hands resting calmly on the armrests. He had commanded ships for 30 years, but nothing had ever felt like this. The Defiance was not just a vessel. She was a statement, a challenge, a promise, written in metal and fire. Their mission was simple on paper. They were to patrol the outer human colonies and gather intelligence on Concorde fleet movements. They were under strict orders to avoid contact with alien ships. This was supposed to be a test flight, nothing more. Admiral Carter would evaluate the ship's systems, train his crew, and return home with a report. That plan lasted exactly 6 days. The distress signal came from Kepler 442b, a small mining colony on the edge of human space. The message was broken and desperate, filled with static and screaming voices. A Xanthari patrol fleet had arrived at the colony and demanded tribute. When the miners explained that they had nothing to give, the aliens had opened fire. Lieutenant Commander Ashley Grant was the tactical officer aboard the Defiance. She was a small woman with sharp features and sharper eyes that missed nothing on her sensor screens. She was the first to detect the distress signal and the first to identify the enemy fleet. 12 Xanthari warships, she reported, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They are in orbit around the colony. I am detecting weapons fire. They are bombarding civilian structures." Admiral Carter's jaw tightened. He looked at the tactical display, showing 12 red dots circling the blue sphere of the human colony. Each of those dots represented a ship that could destroy anything in Earth's regular fleet. Together, they were an overwhelming force. But the Defiance was not a regular ship. "How long until we can reach them?" he asked. 3 hours at maximum speed, sir." Daniel turned to look at his crew. They were watching him with wide eyes, waiting for his decision. They all knew what the smart choice was. They should continue their patrol, report the attack, and let the diplomats handle it. One ship against 12 was suicide, even a ship as powerful as theirs. But Daniel Carter had not spent 2 years building this vessel just to run away from the first fight. "Set course for Kepler 442b, he ordered. "Maximum speed. All hands to battle stations." The Defiance leaped forward like an arrow released from a bow. Her engines burned bright as she crossed the void toward the distant colony. Inside, crew members ran to their positions and prepared for combat. Weapons were charged. Shields were raised. Dr. Megan Torres and her engineering team watched the reactor array with focused intensity, keeping the power flow stable and strong. Commander Thezrak of the Zenthari Empire was enjoying himself. He stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the human colony burn beneath him. His 12 ships had met no resistance. The pathetic human defense platforms had been destroyed in the first minute. Now his crews were taking turns, firing at buildings and vehicles, competing to cause the most destruction. This was how Thezrak liked to spend his time. Humans were weak and soft, barely worth the effort of conquering, but they made satisfying targets, and their screams of terror were music to his ears. He would finish destroying this colony, collect whatever resources survived, and return home as a hero. His tactical officer interrupted his thoughts with a confused report. A single ship was approaching at high speed. Human design. No escort. It was heading directly toward the Zenthari fleet. Thezrak laughed so hard that his scales rattled. One ship. The humans had sent one ship to challenge 12 Zenthari warships. Either they were incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both. Destroy it, he ordered casually. Make it quick. I want to finish with this colony before dinner. The nearest Zenthari cruiser turned its weapons toward the incoming vessel and fired a full spread of plasma torpedoes and laser beams. It was enough firepower to destroy any human ship ever built. The attack crossed the distance in seconds and struck the strange, ugly vessel directly. The Defiance did not even slow down. Her shields flared bright gold as they absorbed the attack. The hybrid barrier system that Laura Bennett's team had designed combined 3 different alien technologies into something entirely new. It bent and flexed with the impact but did not break. Inside the ship, the crew felt only a gentle shudder. Ashley Grant's fingers danced across her console. Shields, holding at 92%. Returning fire. The Defiance's main weapons spoke for the first time in real combat. Enhanced Thalorian cannons, powered by Megan's impossible reactor array, sent beams of concentrated energy screaming across space. They struck the Zenthari cruiser that had fired on them. The alien ship's shields collapsed in an instant. The beams punched through its hull like needles through paper. Internal explosions ripped the vessel apart from the inside. In less than 3 seconds, the cruiser was nothing but expanding debris and burning gas. Silence fell across the Zenthari fleet. Commander Thezrak stared at his tactical display with his mouth hanging open. One of his cruisers had just been destroyed by a single volley from a human ship. That was impossible. Human weapons could not do that. Human technology was centuries behind the Zenthari. All ships, attack formation, he screamed. Destroy that vessel immediately. 11 Zenthari warships turned their weapons on the Defiance and fired everything they had. The space around the human ship lit up with plasma fire and energy beams. It was enough firepower to crack a small moon. The Defiance danced through the barrage like a leaf in the wind. Kevin Shaw's unpredictable movement patterns confused the Zenthari targeting computers. Shots that should have hit sailed past harmlessly. The few attacks that connected were absorbed by shields that seemed to grow stronger with every impact. And through it all, the Defiance kept firing. Ashley Grant coordinated the attack with cold precision. She identified weak points in the Zenthari formation and exploited them ruthlessly. Her targeting systems, enhanced with human predictive algorithms, hit enemy ships where their shields were weakest. One by one, the Zenthari cruisers began to fall. The second ship died with a direct hit to its engine core. The third was disabled when precision strikes destroyed its weapon systems. The fourth and fifth were caught in each other's crossfire when the Defiance moved between them at the last second. Commander Thezrak watched his fleet being torn apart by a single enemy vessel. His scales had turned pale with fear. He had never seen anything like this. No one in the Zenthari Empire had ever seen anything like this. Retreat, he ordered. All ships, retreat. But it was too late for most of them. The Defiance pursued the fleeing ships with relentless determination. Her weapons continued firing even as the Zenthari tried to run. More cruisers fell. More crews died in the cold void of space. When the battle finally ended, the results were beyond belief. 8 Zenthari warships had been destroyed. 3 had surrendered after their weapons and engines were disabled. Only Commander Thezrak's flagship remained combat-capable, and it was running for the safety of Concord space as fast as its damaged engines could carry it. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the Defiance and surveyed the battlefield. Burning wreckage drifted through space where the Zenthari fleet had been. The human colony below was damaged but saved. Thousands of lives that would have been lost were now safe. "Damage report," he said quietly. Ashley Grant checked her displays. "Minor hull scoring on the port side. No casualties. All systems fully operational." "Sir, we barely took a scratch." Daniel nodded slowly. He turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to Earth, and then send a message to High Chancellor Vorax. Tell him that humanity would like to renegotiate our status in the Galactic Concord. Tell him we have built something he needs to see. And one." He paused and looked out at the stars. "Tell him the Defiance sends her regards." The news of the battle at Kepler 442b spread across the galaxy like wildfire. A single human ship had destroyed a Zenthari patrol fleet. 8 warships reduced to debris. 3 captured intact. Commander Thezrak had fled in disgrace. His scales permanently bleached white from the terror of what he had witnessed. The Galactic Concord erupted into chaos. High Chancellor Vorax stood before the Council on Velos Prime and demanded blood. His yellow eyes burned with fury as he pounded his clawed fists against the speaking platform. Humanity had humiliated the Zenthari Empire. They had killed Zenthari warriors. They had captured Zenthari ships. This insult could not stand. The other council members listened with varying degrees of concern. Some were frightened by what the humans had done. Some were secretly pleased to see the arrogant Zenthari brought low, but all of them understood that this situation was dangerous. If one primitive species could challenge the Concord's power, others might follow. The vote was nearly unanimous. Humanity would be declared a rogue species and brought to heel by force. The combined fleets of 6 member species would assemble and crush the human rebellion before it could spread. 300 warships gathered at the edge of human space. It was the largest military force the Concord had deployed in over 1,000 years. Zenthari dreadnoughts flew alongside Korrivan cruisers. Thalorian destroyers formed ranks with Valdori carriers. The fleet stretched across space like a metal wall, blocking the stars themselves. Admiral Daniel Carter received the news aboard the Defiance. He read the intelligence report twice, then set it down and stared out the window at the endless dark. 300 ships. Even the Defiance could not fight those odds. If the Concord fleet reached Earth's colonies, millions of humans would die. Everything they had built would be destroyed. He called his senior officers to the conference room. Laura Bennett was there, her red hair now streaked with gray from months of endless work. Nathan Brooks sat with his arms crossed, his dark face unreadable. Megan Torres fidgeted nervously with her glasses. Kevin Shaw drummed his fingers on the table. Ashley Grant studied tactical projections on her tablet. "We cannot win a straight fight," Daniel said bluntly. "One ship against 300 is not courage. It is stupidity. But we also cannot let them reach our worlds unopposed." "What do you suggest, sir?" Nathan asked. Daniel leaned forward. "We make them afraid. We show them that fighting humanity will cost them more than they are willing to pay. We cannot destroy their fleet, but we can make them wish they had never built it." The plan was insane. The Defiance would jump behind enemy lines and conduct a campaign of terror across Concord space. They would strike targets far from the main fleet, forcing the Concord to spread their forces thin. They would hit supply depots and communication relays. They would appear over homeworlds and vanish before reinforcements arrived. They would become a ghost that haunted the dreams of every Concord officer. Laura Bennett was the first to speak. "The ship can handle it. The reactor array is stable, and our supplies will last for months." Kevin Shaw grinned. "I have been wanting to test some new maneuvers. This seems like the perfect opportunity." Ashley Grant nodded slowly. "Their fleet is built for conventional warfare. They will not know how to respond to guerrilla tactics. Megan Torres pushed her glasses up her nose. I have some modifications I have been wanting to try. This might be the time. No. Nathan Brooks looked at Daniel with steady eyes. The crew will follow you anywhere, sir. You know that. Daniel looked at each of them in turn. These were the people who had built the impossible ship he now commanded. These were the people who would help him save humanity. Then let us begin, he said. The Defiance vanished into the depths of space. For the next 3 weeks, she became the most feared vessel in the galaxy. They struck a Zenthari supply depot on the 3rd day, destroying fuel reserves meant for the invasion fleet. They appeared over a Corrivan communication station on the 7th day and disabled the relay network for an entire sector. They ambushed a patrol squadron on the 12th day and left no survivors to report what they had seen. The Concord fleet commanders went mad trying to catch them. Every time they sent ships to hunt the Defiance, she was already gone. Every time they thought they knew where she would strike next, she appeared somewhere completely different. The human ship moved through their space like a phantom, untouchable and unstoppable. Vorax, the younger, son of the High Chancellor, took personal command of the hunt. He was young and proud, with scales as dark as his father's, and twice the ambition. He gathered 50 of the fastest warships in the Concord fleet and tracked the Defiance to an asteroid field near the Corvin Nebula. The asteroid field was a graveyard of ancient rocks, spinning slowly through the void. Sensors were unreliable here. Weapons could not lock onto targets through the interference. It was the perfect place for an ambush. Vorax smiled as his fleet surrounded the asteroid field. 50 ships against 1. Even the legendary Defiance could not escape this trap. Human vessel. He broadcast across all frequencies. This is Commander Vorax, of the Zenthari Empire. You are surrounded. Your single ship cannot defeat 50 of ours. Surrender now, and I will grant your crew a quick death. Admiral Carter's response came back almost immediately. His voice was calm and steady, without a trace of fear. Watch us. The Battle of Corvin began with a flash of light as the Defiance burst from cover behind a massive asteroid. She did not try to run. She did not try to hide. She flew directly into the heart of the Concord formation with her weapons blazing. The Concord ships opened fire, but their shots hit asteroids more often than they hit the Defiance. Kevin Shaw's piloting was beyond anything they had ever seen. He used the spinning rocks as cover, darting between them at speeds that should have been impossible. He led the enemy ships into collision courses with each other. He made them fire on their own allies. Ashley Grant turned the chaos into destruction. Her targeting systems tracked every enemy ship, while the Defiance weaved through the asteroid field. She fired in short, devastating bursts that destroyed engines, weapons, and shield generators. She did not try to kill every ship. She just needed to disable them, to take them out of the fight. The Concord fleet fell apart. Their rigid formation became a tangled mess as ships tried to pursue the Defiance through the asteroids. Their communication network collapsed when the human ship targeted command vessels first. Captains without orders panicked and made mistakes. Vorax, the younger, screamed commands that no one could hear. His flagship took a direct hit that disabled its weapons. Another hit destroyed its engines. He was left drifting helplessly, watching through his view screen as his fleet was systematically destroyed. When the battle finally ended, 37 Concord warships were destroyed or disabled. Only 13 managed to retreat into open space. Vorax, the younger's flagship, hung dead in the void, its crew trapped and helpless. Admiral Carter brought the Defiance alongside the crippled vessel. He broadcast his message across every Concord frequency, knowing that the entire galaxy would hear his words. We did not ask for this war. You gave it to us. You laughed at us. You gave us garbage and told us it was all we deserved. But you made a mistake. You underestimated what humans can do when we have nothing left to lose. He paused, letting his words sink in. Go back to your council. Tell them what you saw here today. Tell them that if they come for us again, we will build 100 ships like this one. 1,000. We will tear your Concord apart piece by piece until nothing remains. Or you can talk to us as equals. The choice is yours. He cut the transmission and turned to face his crew. They were exhausted, running on adrenaline and determination, but they were also proud. They had done the impossible. "Take us home," Daniel said quietly. "We have made our point. Now we wait for their answer." The Defiance turned toward Earth and jumped into faster-than-light travel, leaving the burning wreckage of the Concorde fleet behind. The message had been delivered. Now the galaxy would have to decide what it meant. And somewhere on Velos Prime, High Chancellor Vorax watched the battle recordings with trembling claws. For the first time in his long life, he knew what it felt like to be afraid. The Galactic Concorde Council met in emergency session for the first time in 300 years. The great circular chamber on Velos Prime was filled with frightened delegates and angry accusations. Representatives from 6 species demanded answers. How had this happened? How had a single human ship defeated the largest military force assembled in a millennium? What were they supposed to do now? High Chancellor Vorax stood at the center of the storm. His scales had faded from dark green to a sickly pale color that betrayed his inner turmoil. He demanded war. He demanded that every ship in the Concorde be sent to destroy humanity once and for all. He demanded blood and fire, and the complete extermination of the species that had humiliated his empire. But his voice had lost its thunder. The other delegates looked at him with different eyes now. They had seen the battle recordings from Corvin. They had watched 50 ships fail to destroy one human vessel. They had counted the dead and calculated the cost. And they had realized something that Vorax refused to accept. The Zenthari were not as strong as they had always claimed. And the humans were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Ambassador Kelani of the Thalorian Republic rose to speak. She was an ancient being with silver skin and 3 eyes that held the wisdom of centuries. Her people had always been the voice of reason in the Concorde. And now she spoke with careful precision. "We have 2 paths before us," she said. "We can continue this war and watch our fleets burn. We can throw ship after ship at humanity until we have nothing left. And perhaps we will eventually destroy them. But at what cost? How many of our people will die? How many worlds will we lose? And what will be left of the Concorde when it is over?" She paused and looked directly at Vorax. "Or we can accept reality. The humans have proven their worth. They took our garbage and built something magnificent. Perhaps it is time to stop treating them as servants and start treating them as equals." The debate lasted for 7 days. Vorax fought against every proposal for peace. He threatened and blustered and made promises of revenge that grew more desperate with each passing hour, but his support had vanished like smoke in the wind. Species that had followed the Zenthari for thousands of years now looked elsewhere for leadership. On the 8th day, the Council voted. Humanity would be granted full membership in the Galactic Concorde, with all the rights and privileges that came with it. They would have a seat on the Council. Their ships would patrol Concorde space as equals. Their engineers would work in shipyards across the galaxy. In exchange, humans would share the technology behind the Defiance and help modernize the Concorde's aging military. Admiral Daniel Carter traveled to Velos Prime for the 2nd time. But this time, everything was different. He walked through the same corridors where he had been mocked and dismissed years before. But now the alien beings around him stepped aside with respect. Some nodded in greeting. Some simply stared with a mixture of fear and admiration. None of them laughed. The signing ceremony was held in the council chamber. Daniel stood at the center of the room where he had once been treated like a beggar asking for scraps. Now he stood as the representative of humanity, the 48th member species of the Galactic Concorde. He signed his name on the treaty document with a steady hand. Kelani signed for the Thalorian Republic. Representatives from other species added their marks. And at the end, High Chancellor Vorax was required to sign as well. The old Zenthari approached the document with visible reluctance. His claws shook as he held the signing stylus. His yellow eyes burned with hatred that he could barely contain. But he had no choice. The council had voted, and even he had to obey. After the ceremony, Vorax approached Daniel in a quiet corner of the chamber. His scales had regained some of their dark color, but his posture was bent with defeat. "You tricked us," he hissed quietly. "You pretended to be weak. You let us think you were nothing." Daniel shook his head slowly. We did not pretend anything. We were exactly what we appeared to be. New, inexperienced, technologically behind. But those things do not make a species weak. They just make us hungry. Hungry? Hungry to learn. Hungry to grow. Hungry to prove ourselves. You looked at us and saw primitives playing with toys. You never bothered to look deeper. You never wondered what we might become if we were given a chance. That was your mistake, not ours. Vorax had no response. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of delegates. Daniel watched him go with calm eyes. There was no satisfaction in the moment. No joy in the victory. There was only the weight of responsibility for what came next. 1 year passed, and humanity began to find its place in the galaxy. Laura Bennett became the director of the new Galactic Engineering Corps. Her team spread across Concord space, upgrading outdated technology and building new systems that combined the best of human innovation with alien science. She worked 18 hours a day and loved every minute of it. The universe had become her workshop, and she intended to make it shine. Nathan Brooks was promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of the Concord's newly formed Rapid Response Division. His ships were crewed by officers from a dozen different species, all trained in the tactics that had made humanity famous. He taught them to think creatively, to adapt to changing situations, to never assume that the enemy would follow the rules. Megan Torres received the highest scientific honors the Concorde could offer. Her work on reactor technology sparked a revolution in power generation across the galaxy. Ships that had once been limited by their energy supplies now had power to spare. Stations that had struggled to maintain basic systems now flourished with excess capacity. She became a legend among engineers of every species. Kevin Shaw opened a flight school on one of Earth's outer colonies. Young pilots from across the Concorde came to learn from the man who had flown circles around the Zenthari fleet. He taught them that the most important tool in combat was not weapons or shields, but the mind of the person in the cockpit. His students went on to become some of the finest pilots the galaxy had ever seen. Ashley Grant took command of her own ship, a new vessel built using the principles they had developed on the Defiance. She led her crew on missions throughout Concorde space, protecting the innocent and hunting the guilty. Her reputation for precision and fairness made her respected even among former enemies. And the USS Defiance herself remained in service as the flagship of the human fleet. She was old now, by warship standards, and newer vessels had been built that were faster and stronger. But none of them carried the same weight of history. None of them had proven what humanity could accomplish when pushed to the edge. Admiral Daniel Carter retired 5 years after the Concorde Treaty was signed. He was tired in a way that sleep could not fix, and he wanted to spend his remaining years in peace. But before he left, he gave one final speech at a ceremony attended by delegates from all 48 member species. He stood at a podium on Velos Prime, the same station where humanity's journey had begun. The audience stretched before him like a sea of different colors and shapes. Beings from across the galaxy gathered to hear his words. "I want to tell you a story," he began. "It is a story about a species that came to the stars with nothing but hope and determination. They asked to join the great powers of the galaxy, and they were given garbage, scrap metal, broken machines. The message was clear. You are nothing. You deserve nothing. Go away and be forgotten." He paused and let the silence stretch. But that species did not give up. They took the garbage and studied it. They learned from it. They built something new from the pieces that were meant to insult them, and when the time came, they used that creation to earn their place among the stars. Daniel looked out at the assembled delegates. Some had been enemies. Some had been allies. Some had simply watched from the sidelines. But all of them were listening now. The lesson is simple. It does not matter what you are given. It does not matter if the universe treats you fairly or unfairly. What matters is what you choose to do with what you have. You can accept your circumstances and surrender to despair, or you can take the scraps you have been offered and build something magnificent. He smiled, and for a moment he looked like the young officer who had first dreamed of reaching the stars. They gave us scrap metal. They thought it would keep us down. Instead, It taught us the most important lesson any species can learn. Our circumstances do not define us. Our choices do. And we chose to build. The audience erupted in applause that echoed through the chamber like thunder. Species that had once looked down on humanity now cheered alongside them. The galaxy had changed, and it would never go back to what it was before. Daniel Carter stepped away from the podium and walked into retirement with his head held high. Behind him, the Defiance still flew her patrol routes through Concord space, crewed by the descendants of her original builders. And whenever a new species applied for membership in the Galactic Concord, they were told the story of humanity. The species that was given garbage and turned it into greatness. The species that refused to accept its place at the bottom. The species that built the deadliest warship the galaxy had ever seen from nothing but scrap metal and determination. And the galaxy learned to never underestimate them again.